valve right now or you are going to jail.
What happens when you call 911 on someone for turning off their own water? Diane Morrison found out. She stood at my gate with 6 residents, phone recording, demanding Sheriff Brennan arrest me for water theft. The creek flowing through my Montana ranch to her luxury subdivision had slowed to 15 gallons per minute. She called it illegal. The sheriff called it contractual. What Diane didn't know, my family has held senior water rights to that spring since 1934. The 1996 agreement she was operating under allowed exactly 15 gallons per minute for irrigation. And landscaping only. Not fountains, not koi ponds, not swimming pools. She'd been drawing 3 times the legal limit for months. When I installed a valve to enforce the contract, she hired a backhoe, trespassed on my property, and dug a 30-foot trench to bypass it. She destroyed spawning gravel for federally protected bull trout. Diane made the mistake every entitled neighbor makes, assuming 2 years of unauthorized use established. Permanent rights to someone else's water? She assumed wrong. This is the story of how an HOA president went to federal prison for 18 months because she never asked one question: who actually owns the water I've been taking? $85,000 in fines, $35,000 in habitat restoration, $120,000 in restitution. All because water law doesn't care how much you need it. It cares who owns the spring. But let me start from the beginning. Before we dive into, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more interesting stories just like this. Emma Hartley was kneeling in the dirt, wrestling with a stubborn fence post when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. She looked up. Squinting against the afternoon sun, a white Ford F-150 with Gallatin County Sheriff printed on the door was rolling up her driveway. Emma stood slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans. She'd been working on the fence line for 2 hours, placing posts that had rotted through the winter. She wasn't expecting company, especially not from law enforcement. The truck stopped 20 feet away. The driver's door opened, and Sheriff Tom Brennan stepped out, all mid-50s, weathered face under a wide-brimmed hat. He'd been sheriff for 15 years, and before that, he'd grown up to ranches over. Emma had known him since they were kids. "Tom," Emma said, pulling off her work gloves. "What brings you out here?" Tom walked over, his expression somewhere between apologetic and amused. "Emma, I got a 911 call about an hour ago. The caller says you shut off the community water supply. She wants you arrested for water theft." Emma stared at him. "Water theft? That's what she said? Community water supply?"
"Yes, Tom, that's my spring."
"My creek? What the hell is she talking about?" Tom sighed. "Her name's Diane Morrison. From Pine Ridge Estates? You know her?" Emma's jaw tightened. "Yeah, I know her." "Well, she's at your front gate right now with half a dozen residents, and she's demanding I arrest you. Says you're depriving them of water they have a legal right to." Emma looked past Tom, toward the ranch entrance a quarter mile down the driveway. She couldn't see the gate from here, but she could imagine the scene. Diane Morrison, HOA president, professional busybody, the most entitled person Emma had ever met. "Tom, that water comes from a spring on my property. It's been in my family. Since 1934, Diane's subdivision has limited access under an agreement. My father signed in the 90s, irrigation and landscaping only. She's been violating that agreement for months, filling fountains, koi ponds, private swimming pools. I installed a valve 2 days ago to bring the flow back to contractual levels. That's it. It's all I did." Tom nodded slowly. "So you didn't shut off their water entirely?" "No, I reduced it to what they're legally entitled to. 15 gallons per minute, exactly what the agreement specifies." "And you have documentation of this agreement?" "In my truck. Want to see it?" "Yeah, but first let's go talk to Ms. Morrison. She's been on my dispatcher's line 3 times in the past hour, threatening to call the governor if I don't arrest you." Emma grabbed her gloves and tools, tossed them in the bed of her pickup. Kay and climbed into the passenger seat of Tom's cruiser. They drove toward the ranch entrance in silence. The gate at the edge of Emma's property was a simple steel frame with a cattle guard on one side and a gravel road leading out to the county highway. It marked the boundary between Emma's 180 acres and the rest of the world. Today, it also marked the boundary between Emma's patients and Diane Morrison's entitlement. 6. People were standing on the public side of the gate. 5 of them looked uncomfortable middle-aged men and women in casual clothes, shifting their weight, glancing at each other like they weren't sure why they were there. The 6th person was Diane Morrison. She stood front and center, arms crossed, phone held up in one hand, clearly recording video. Diane was 58, blonde hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing white capri pants and a pastel blue blouse that looked like it cost more than Emma's monthly feed bill. She had the kind of posture that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager," and the kind of expression that said she'd already decided Emma was guilty. Tom parked the cruiser and got out. Emma followed. Diane's voice rang out immediately, loud and sharp. "Officer, finally. This woman has shut off our water supply. You have rights to that water and she's depriving an entire community. I want her arrested." Tom walked up to the gate slowly, his hands resting on his belt. "Ma'am, I'm Sheriff Brennan. You called 911? "Yes, because this woman," she pointed at Emma, "turned off the water that flows to our subdivision. We've been using it for 2 years and she shut it off without warning. That's theft." "Ma'am, whose property is the water source located on?" Diane hesitated just for a second. "It's community water. It flows through the subdivision. Everyone uses it. But where does it originate?" "It's a creek. It flows from the mountains." "Through whose land?" Diane's jaw tightened. "It flows through her property first. But that doesn't mean she owns it." Emma stepped forward, her voice calm, but firm. "Tom, the spring that feeds that creek is on my land, about half a mile upstream from here. The creek runs 2 miles through my property before it crosses the boundary onto what used to be the old Peterson Ranch. That's where Pine Ridge was built. I own the source. The subdivision has limited access under a conditional agreement." Diane pointed her phone at Emma, still recording. "You can't just turn off water that people depend on. That's illegal." "Sss." Tom looked at Diane. "Ma'am, do you have a water rights deed?" "A legal document that grants your subdivision ownership or permanent access to this water." "We don't need one. We've been using it for 2 years. That establishes our right." Tom shook his head. "Ma'am, that's not how water rights work in Montana, especially not when the source is on private property." Diane's face flushed red. "This is absurd. Officer, are you going to do your job, or are you going to let her get away with this because you're friends?" Tom's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, I'm doing my job, and part of that job is understanding the law. Miss Hartley, can you show me the documentation you mentioned?" Emma walked back to Tom's cruiser, opened the passenger door, and pulled a folder from her bag. She handed it to Tom. Inside were 3 documents. Water rights certificate. No. 34G1934, issued to Samuel Hartley, Emma's grandfather, in 1934. Granting senior appropriative rights to the spring on the property. Priority date, March 15, 1934. Conditional. Water use agreement signed in 1996 between Robert Hartley, Emma's father, and Peterson Land and Development. Allowed limited downstream water access for irrigation and landscaping purposes only. Maximum draw of 15 gallons per minute. Property deed transfer recorded in 2018. Transferring the ranch and all associated water rights from Robert Hartley to Emma Hartley upon his death. Tom reviewed each document carefully, then looked at Diane. "Ma'am, Miss Hartley owns the water source. Her family's rights date back to 1934. The agreement your subdivision operates under is conditional and limited. It specifies irrigation and landscaping only, with a maximum draw of 15 gallons per minute. Do you understand that?" Diane crossed her arms. "I understand that she's trying to bully us into accepting less water than we need." "How much water are you using?" Diane hesitated. "I don't know the exact number. More than 15 gallons per minute. Probably for what purposes? Irrigation, landscaping, fountains, koi ponds. Some residents have pools." Tom raised an eyebrow. pools, decorative water features. They enhance property values. Ma'am, the agreement specifies irrigation and landscaping only. Fountains, koi ponds, and pools aren't covered. That's a technicality. No, ma'am, that's the agreement. One of the other residents, a man in his 40s wearing a polo shirt, spoke up nervously. Diane, maybe we should just talk to Ms. Hartley. Work something out. Diane spun on him. We're not negotiating with someone who's holding our water hostage. Emma kept her voice level. I'm not holding anything hostage, Diane. I'm enforcing the agreement your subdivision signed. You've been drawing 3 times the allowed amount for months. My cattle are struggling because the creek's running low. I asked you to stop. You ignored me. So I installed a valve to bring the flow back to legal levels. That's all I did. You should have warned us. I sent you a certified letter in September. You didn't respond. I didn't think you were serious. Tom closed the folder and handed it back to Emma. Ms. Morrison, here's the situation. Ms. Hartley owns the water source. She has senior water rights that predate your subdivision by 90 years. She's allowed to control the flow of water on her property. The agreement you're operating under is conditional. It sounds like your subdivision has been violating it. Ms. Hartley is within her legal rights. Let's reduce the flow to the specified limit. I'm not arresting her. Diane's face went from red to purple. This is corruption. You're protecting her because you're friends. Tom's voice stayed calm, but his tone hardened. Ma'am, I'm not arresting her because she hasn't committed a crime. If you have a legal dispute about the water agreement, you can file a civil lawsuit. But calling 911 and demanding I arrest someone for managing their own water on their own property, that's abuse of emergency services. If you call 911 again for something that isn't an actual emergency, I'll cite you. Diane pointed at Emma, her hand shaking with rage. This isn't over. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to make sure everyone in this county knows what kind of person you are. Emma met her gaze, calm and steady. You do that, Diane? Diane turned on her heel and stormed toward a white Lexus SUV parked on the side of the road. The other 5 residents followed, avoiding eye contact with Emma. Tom watched them drive away, then turned to Emma. She's going to be a problem. I know. You sure you want to go through with this? Reducing their water? Tom, I don't have a choice. They're using 3 times what they're entitled to. My creek's drying up. My cattle need that water. I'm not going to let some HOA president with a god complex take what doesn't belong to her. Tom nodded. Fair enough. But Emma, document everything. Every interaction, every letter, every gallon they use. Because if she sues, you're going to need it already doing it. Good. Tom tipped his hat. Call me if she shows up here again. Will do. Tom got back in his cruiser and drove off, dust rising behind him on the gravel road. Emma stood at the gate. Watching the dust settle, Diane Morrison thought she could bully Emma into giving her free water, thought she could call 911 and have Emma arrested for managing her own property, thought that because her subdivision had been using the water for 2 years, it somehow belonged to them. She had no idea what she'd just started. Emma climbed into her truck and drove back toward the house. Her hands tight on the wheel, Diane wanted a fight. Emma had spent 52 years on this ranch. She'd learned water law from her father, who'd learned it from his father. She knew every spring, every creek, every inch of this land, and she knew one thing for certain. No HOA president from a luxury subdivision was going to take her water not. Without a fight, I didn't grow up dreaming of being a rancher. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I loved the ocean, loved the idea of swimming with dolphins and studying coral reefs. I went to college in California, got a degree in environmental science, and spent 2 years working for a conservation nonprofit in San Diego. But in 2005, my mother got sick, cancer, stage 3. I came home to Montana to help take care of her, thinking I'd stay for a few months and then go back to California. She died 8 months later, and I never left. My father needed help running the ranch. He was 63, still strong, but the workload was too much for one person. He'd been doing it alone since I moved away. It was wearing him down. so I stayed. And somewhere between feeding cattle in January snowstorms and fixing irrigation lines in July heat, I fell in love with the land. Not the romantic postcard version of ranch life, the real version, the hard version. The version where you work 14-hour days and your hands are calloused and you go to bed, exhausted, and wake up at 5 a.m. to do it all over again. The version where the land isn't just property, it's legacy my grandfather, Samuel Hartley, bought. This ranch in 1934, for $1,200, 180 acres in the foothills of the Gallatin Range, 30 miles outside Bozeman, Montana. It wasn't prime land rocky soil, uneven terrain. A creek that ran strong in the spring, but slowed to a trickle by late summer. But Grandpa Sam saw potential. There was a natural spring about half a mile from the southern boundary, hidden in a grove of cottonwoods. It produced 50 gallons of water per minute, year-round, fed by an underground aquifer that never ran dry. Grandpa Sam filed for water rights in March 1934, claiming appropriative rights to the spring under Montana law. Back then, water rights worked on a first-in-time, first-in-right basis. If you were the first to put water to beneficial use, you had senior rights. Everyone else who came later had junior rights. Grandpa Sam was first. He built a system too. Channeled the spring into a creek that ran 2 miles through the property. Watering pastures, feeding livestock, sustaining the ranch through droughts that killed neighboring operations. The creek eventually left our property and continued downstream. It's flowing through what used to be the Peterson Ranch, 640 acres of grassland owned by a guy named Earl Peterson, who ran cattle and mostly kept to himself. Earl never asked for water access. He had his own wells. The creek just passed through his land on its way to the valley below. For 60 years, it stayed that way. Then Earl died. His kids sold the ranch, and a developer showed up at our door. It was 1996. I was 19, home for the summer between. My sophomore and junior years of college, a man in a suit knocked on our door one Saturday morning. His name was Richard Voss, and he worked for a development company called Peterson Land and Development. He told my father they'd bought the old Peterson ranch and were planning to build a residential subdivision. 85 homes, luxury mountain living, golf course, clubhouse, and they wanted access to our water. My father listened politely, then said, "The creek runs through your land. What? But it starts on mine. I'm not selling you water rights," Richard smiled. "We're not asking to buy them, Mr. Hartley. We're asking for a limited use agreement. It's just enough water for irrigation and landscaping. 15 gallons per minute. It's less than a third of your spring's output. You'd barely notice it, and if I say no, then we'll drill wells. But wells are expensive, and the water table in that area is unpredictable. We'd much prefer to work with you." My father thought about it for a long time. Finally, he said, "Irrigation and landscaping only. No industrial use. No resale. 15 gallons per minute, maximum. And if you violate those terms, the agreement's void and I shut off the water." Agreed. They drafted a contract. My father's attorney reviewed it, made sure the terms were clear and enforceable, filed it with Gallatin County as a conditional water use agreement tied to the property deed. It was recorded in June 1996 that subdivision was never built. The developer went bankrupt in 1998. The land sat empty for 25 years, and the agreement sat in a file cabinet. Forgotten my father died in 2018. Heart attack. Was 76. Went to bed one night and didn't wake up. I inherited the ranch, 180 acres. The house, the cattle, the equipment, and the water rights. By then, I've been running the operation for 13 years. I knew every fence line, every pasture, every spring, and creek. I knew the land the way my father had, the way his father had. It was mine now, and I was going to protect it. In 2024, a new developer bought the old Peterson Ranch, Cascade Communities LLC, out of Bozeman. They paid $8 million for the 640 acres and announced plans for a luxury subdivision. Pine Ridge Estates, 85 homes, prices ranging from $800,000 to $1.2 million. Marketed as luxury mountain living with natural water features. I didn't think much of it at first. Rich people from California and Seattle moving to Montana. for the views and the authentic rural experience they'd never actually participate in. It happened all the time. But then I got a call from Cascade's project manager, a woman named Lauren Greer. "Ms. Hartley, we found a water use agreement filed in 1996 between your father and Peterson Land and Development. We're the new owners of that property, and we'd like to honor that agreement. We'll be drawing water from the creek for irrigation and landscaping as specified in the contract. Just wanted to give you a heads up. 15 gallons per minute, irrigation and landscaping only, understood? If you exceed that, the agreement's void. We won't. We'll monitor usage carefully." I hung up, uneasy but not alarmed. The agreement was clear. As long as they followed it, it wouldn't be a problem. Pine Ridge Estates was completed in August 22, 480-5 homes, all sold within 6 months. The subdivision had wide streets, manicured lawns, decorative streetlights, and a clubhouse with a fitness center and meeting rooms and water features. Lots of water features. I noticed them in the spring of 2025 when I rode my horse along the southern boundary of my property and looked down into the subdivision. Fountains in front yards. Big, ornate fountains with multi-tiered basins and decorative lights. Koi ponds in backyards, stocked with expensive fish and swimming pools. Not the above-ground kind. In-ground pools with waterfalls and hot tubs, all of them fed by the creek. My creek. By July, I started noticing the flow dropping. Sections of the creek that used to run knee-deep were down to ankle-deep. Some areas were barely trickling. My cattle were struggling to reach water in the lower pastures. I checked the spring. Still producing 50 gallons per minute, same as always. The problem wasn't the spring. The problem was downstream. I drove down to Pine Ridge and walked along the creek where it entered the subdivision. There were taps, dozens of them. PVC pipes connected to the creek, running to homes, filling fountains, ponds, pools. I counted 12 fountains running full blast. For koi ponds. Constantly circulating water. At least 6 homes with pools. Being filled directly from the creek, I pulled out my phone and did rough math. The agreement allowed 15 gallons per minute. They were using at least 40-5, 3 times the legal limit. I found out who the HOA president was and called her Diane Morrison. We met at a coffee shop in Bozeman on a Saturday in August. Diane was 58, blonde, polished. She wore white capri pants and a pastel blouse, and she ordered a skinny vanilla latte with oat milk. I ordered black coffee and got to the point. "Diane, your subdivision is using too much water from my creek. The agreement specifies 15 gallons per minute for irrigation and landscaping. You're drawing 3 times that. It needs to stop." Diane smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Ms. Hartley, the agreement says we have water access. We're accessing it. It's for irrigation and landscaping, not pools and fountains. Those are landscaping features. Enhanced property values. They're not covered by the agreement." "That's your interpretation. It's not an interpretation. It's what the contract says." Diane set her latte down. "Ms. Hartley, our residents moved here for the lifestyle Pine Ridge offers. That includes water features. We're not going to shut off fountains and drain pools because you don't like how much water we use. I don't care what you like, Diane. I care about my cattle and my land. The creek's running low because you're overusing it. Reduce your draw to 15 gallons per minute or I'll enforce the agreement." Diane leaned back, crossing her arms. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" "By shutting off your access." "You can't do that." "Yes, I can. The agreement's conditional. If you violate the terms, I can terminate it." Diane laughed. "Good luck with that, Miss Hartley. We have 85 families depending on that water. You shut it off and you'll have 85 lawsuits." I stood up. "Reduce your usage, Diane. This is your only warning." I walked out in September. I sent Diane a certified letter, formal notice of agreement violation. Water use exceeds contractual limits. I laid out the facts. The agreement specified 15 gallons per minute. Pine Ridge was using 3 times that, and if usage wasn't reduced within 30 days, I would take action to enforce the contract. The letter was delivered on September 12th. Diane signed for it. She never responded. In October, I hired an attorney, Stephen Nakamura, a water rights specialist in Bozeman. He'd handled disputes all over Montana and knew the law better than anyone. I showed him the agreement, the water rights certificate, and the evidence of Pine Ridge's overuse. Stephen read everything carefully, then looked up. Emma, you have senior water rights. The oldest in the county, probably. The subdivision's access is conditional and limited. If they're violating the terms and they clearly can legally reduce their supply, you can even cut it off entirely if you want. I don't want to cut them off. I just want them to follow the agreement, then install a flow control system. Put a valve on your property that limits downstream flow to exactly 15 gallons per minute. That's what the contract allows. Anything beyond that is theft. How much will that cost? Probably $15,000 to $20,000 for a good system. But Emma, it's worth it. Because once that valve's in place, there's nothing they can do. It's your water, your land, your right. I thought about Diane's face at the coffee shop, the smugness, the certainty that she could do whatever she wanted. Set it up. The valve was installed on November 1st, a hydraulic flow control system, professionally, installed at the point where the creek crossed my property line. It limited downstream flow to exactly 15 gallons per minute. Cost $18,000. 2 days later, Diane called 911, tried to have me arrested. And that's when everything went nuclear. The hydraulic engineer arrives at Emma's ranch on the morning of November 1st. Driving a truck loaded with equipment and a trailer carrying sections of industrial-grade PVC pipe. His name is Robert Chen, and he's been doing water systems in Montana for 20 years. Emma hired him 3 weeks ago. After Stephen recommended him as the best in the state, Robert walks the property line with Emma, surveying the point where the creek crosses from her land onto the Pine Ridge subdivision. This is good placement, Robert says, kneeling by the creek bank. Ground's stable, access is clear, and you're well within your property boundary. No one can claim you're obstructing water on their land. How does the system work? Emma asks. Simple. We install a valve here. He points to a spot about 10 feet upstream from the boundary line, connected to a flow meter. The meter measures gallons per minute in real time. When flow exceeds 15 gallons, the valve restricts it back down. Automated, precise, no guesswork. Can they tamper with it? Not easily. The valve's locked in a concrete housing, and the controls are password protected. If someone tries to force it open, the system sends an alert to your phone. How long to install? 1 day, maybe 2 if we hit complications. Do it. The installation takes a day and a half. Robert and his crew dig a trench, set the valve housing. In concrete, run the piping, and calibrate the flow meter. By the afternoon of November 2nd, the system is operational. Robert shows Emma the control panel on her phone, a simple app that displays real-time water flow, historical data, and system alerts. Right now, you're sending about 42 gallons per minute downstream, Robert says, pointing at the screen. That's what they've been using. When I activate the restriction, it'll drop to 15. You ready? Emma nods. Do it. Robert taps the screen. The valve engages with a low mechanical hum. On the app, the flow rate drops. 42, 35, 28, 20. At 15. It holds steady at 15 gallons per minute. That's it, Robert says. They're now getting exactly what the agreement allows. Nothing more. Emma looks downstream, toward the subdivision hidden beyond the tree line. She imagines the fountains slowing, the koi ponds dropping, the pools struggling to fill. Thank you. Robert, anytime, and Emma, document everything. If they try to challenge this, you'll want records showing the system's working exactly as specified. Oh, I will. Robert and his crew pack up and leave. Emma stands by the creek, watching the water flow past the valve, steady and controlled. 15 gallons per minute. Exactly what Diane Morrison's subdivision is entitled to, and not a drop more. The call comes. At 7:04 a.m. on November 3rd, Emma is feeding the horses when her phone rings. She doesn't recognize the number, but the area code is local. She answers, Hello. What did you do? The voice is shrill, furious, unmistakably Diane Morrison's. Good morning, Diane. Don't good morning me. What did you do to the water? Fountains aren't working. The koi pond in my backyard is half empty. People are calling me saying their irrigation systems are failing. Emma keeps her voice calm. I installed a flow control system 2 days ago. You're now receiving the exact amount specified in the water use agreement. 15 gallons per minute. That's not enough. It's what you're entitled to. You can't do this. We have 85 homes depending on that water. Then you should have followed the agreement instead of using 3 times what you're allowed. This is illegal. You're cutting off a community water supply. No, Diane, I'm enforcing a contract your subdivision agreed to. If you want more water, drill a well or connect to the municipal supply. You bitch, Emma hangs up. She stands there for a moment, phone in hand, adrenaline buzzing. Then she screenshots the call log, timestamps it, saves it to a folder on her phone labeled Pine Ridge Dispute Evidence. Stephen told her to document everything. She's documenting everything. At 2:15 p.m., Sheriff Tom Brennan's cruiser rolls up Emma's driveway again. Emma watches from the porch. UNSURPRASE. She walks out to meet him as he parks. Let me guess, Emma says. Diane called 911. Tom sighs. Yeah, says you shut off their water and she wants you arrested. I didn't shut it off. I reduced it to contractual levels. I know. That's what I'm about to tell her. She's at your gate. Again, want to ride along? Might as well. The scene at the gate is almost identical to yesterday. Diane Morrison stands on the public side, arms crossed, phone recording. This time, she's brought 6 residents with her different faces from yesterday, but the same uncomfortable energy. Tom parks and gets out. Emma follows. Diane doesn't wait for Tom to speak. Officer, this woman has shut off our water supply. We have a legal right to that water, and she's depriving us of it. I want her arrested. Tom's voice is patient but firm. I went through this yesterday. Ms. Hartley owns the water source. She has senior water rights. She's allowed to control the flow. She's controlling it to 0. Our fountains are dry. Our landscaping is dying. Ma'am, is the water completely shut off, or is it reduced? Diane hesitates. Reduced, but it's not enough. How much are you receiving? I don't know. Not. But it's not what we were getting before. Tom looks at Emma. How much are they getting now? 15 gallons per minute. Exactly what the 1996 agreement specifies. Tom turns back to Diane. So, Ms. Hartley is providing exactly the amount your subdivision is legally entitled to. But it's not enough for our needs. That's not Miss Hartley's problem. If you need more water, you'll have to find another source. One of the residents speaks up, a man in his 50s, wearing a polo shirt and golf visor. Officer, we bought our homes based on the water features. Fountains, ponds, landscaping. The developer told us water access was unlimited. Tom raises an eyebrow. Who's the developer? Cascade Communities. Did they give you a copy of the water use agreement? The man hesitates. I don't think so. Then you need to talk to them, not Miss Hartley. Diane's face is red now, veins standing out on her neck. This is bullshit. She's punishing us because we wouldn't kiss her ass. Tom's voice hardens. Ma'am, I'm not arresting Ms. Hartley. She's following the law. If you have a legal dispute, file a lawsuit. But I'm warning you, if you call 911 again for something that isn't an emergency, I will cite you for misuse of emergency services. Do you understand? Diane glares at him, jaw clenched. Then she spins around and storms toward her Lexus, residents trailing behind her. Tom watches her go, then turns to Emma. She's going to escalate. I know. You ready for that? Emma looks toward the subdivision. Hidden beyond the ridge, I've been ready. That evening, Diane Morrison holds an emergency HOA meeting at the Pine Ridge clubhouse. 60 residents attend, more than half the subdivision. The room buzzes with anger, confusion, frustration. Diane stands at the front, arms crossed, projecting authority. Everyone, thank you for coming. As you've all noticed, our water supply has been drastically reduced. Emma Hartley, the rancher upstream, installed a valve on her property 2 days ago. She's cut off most of our water access. A woman in the front row raises her hand. Can she legally do that? Diane pauses, choosing her words carefully. It doesn't matter. We've been using that water for 2 years. We've established our right to it. She can't just take it away. A man in the back speaks up. But if there's an agreement, the agreement is outdated and unreasonable, Diane interrupts. It was written 30 years ago for a completely different development. It doesn't account for modern water needs. We have 85 homes here. Families, children. We can't survive on 15 gallons per minute. Another resident. What are we supposed to do about the fountains, the koi ponds, the koi ponds, my pools? Half empty. Diane's expression hardens. We're going to sue her. I've already contacted an attorney. We'll file an injunction to restore full water access, and we'll seek damages for the harm she's caused. How much will that cost? The HOA will cover legal fees. This is a community issue, but what if we lose? Diane's voice rises. We won't lose. Emma Hartley is trying to bully us. She thinks because she's been here longer, she can do whatever she wants. We're going to show her that this community has rights. And if the lawsuit doesn't work, she pauses, letting the silence hang. We'll take matters into our own hands. Room goes quiet. Someone in the middle row asks nervously, what does that mean? Diane smiles, cold and sharp. It means we do whatever's necessary to protect our homes. On November 5th, Emma receives the lawsuit. Pine Ridge Homeowners Association v. Emma Hartley. Petition for injunction and declaratory relief for claims are predictable. Emma violated the HOA's established water rights by unilaterally reducing supply. Emma caused economic harm by devaluing homes dependent on water features. Emma acted in bad faith by refusing to negotiate a reasonable solution. The demands: court order restoring full water flow to pre-valve levels, $500,000 in damages for economic harm and emotional distress, attorney's fees and costs. Emma reads it twice, then calls Stephen Nakamura. I got the lawsuit, I saw. They filed it this morning. Emma, this is frivolous. They have no legal standing. Own the water rights. The agreement is clear. They'll lose. How long until the hearing? 6 to 8 weeks. Judge will review both sides, and unless the HOA presents something we haven't seen, they'll dismiss it. What do I do in the meantime? Keep the valve in place. Don't touch it. Document every interaction with Diane or anyone from Pine Ridge. If they threaten you, record it. If they trespass, call the sheriff. And Emma, what? Be careful. Diane Morrison sounds unhinged. People like that don't stop just because the law says they're wrong. Emma hangs up and looks out the window toward the southern ridge, where Pine Ridge sits just beyond sight. Stephen was right. Diane was unhinged. And 2 weeks later, she crossed a line she couldn't come back from. I'm riding the fence line on the southern pasture when I hear it. A diesel engine. Low rumbling mechanical. It's coming from the direction of the creek. I rein my horse, Cisco, to a stop and listen. The sound doesn't belong. There's no construction on my property, no equipment, no reason for an engine to be running anywhere near the creek. I nudge Cisco into a trot, heading toward the noise. It takes me 5 minutes to reach the source, and when I do, I can't believe what I'm seeing. A backhoe. A full-sized yellow backhoe. Parked 20 feet inside my property line, its bucket tearing into the earth next to the creek and standing beside it. Arms crossed, watching the operator work, is Diane Morrison. I pull Cisco to a stop and dismount, rage flooding through me. So fast I can barely speak. Diane, what the hell are you doing? Diane turns, her expression calm, almost satisfied. Fixing the problem you created. I look past her at the backhoe, the operator, a man in his 30s. Wearing a hard hat and work gloves, is digging a trench parallel to the creek. It's already 30 feet long, 3 feet wide, and at least 4 feet deep, and I realize what he's doing. He's diverting the creek, redirecting the flow around my valve system. It's bypassing it entirely. sending water downstream to the subdivision without any restrictions. You're trespassing, I say, my voice shaking with anger. And you're illegally diverting water on my property. Diane shrugs. This is community water. You don't own it. Yes, I do. I own the spring. I own the creek bed. I own this land. You are standing on my property, destroying it without permission. That's trespassing. Sue me. I stare at her, stunned by the audacity. She actually thinks she can get away with this. I pull out my phone and dial Sheriff Tom Brennan. Diane watches me, bothered. Go ahead, he won't do anything. Tom answers on the second ring. Emma, what's up? Tom. Diane Morrison is on my property with a backhoe, digging a trench to divert my creek. She's trespassing and she's destroying my land. I'm on my way.
Don't.
Engage with her. Just stay there. I'm not going anywhere. I hang up and look at Diane. Sheriff's coming. Good, maybe he'll talk some sense into you. The backhoe keeps digging, the bucket scooping up dirt and rock, dumping it to the side. The trench is getting deeper, closer to breaching the creek bank. Tell him to stop, I say. No, Diane, if that trench breaks through, you're going to flood my pasture and destroy the creek bed. This is criminal. What's criminal is you cutting off water that people depend on. I didn't cut it off. I reduced it to legal levels. 15 gallons per minute isn't enough. You know it, and I know it, so I'm fixing it. You're committing a crime. Diane steps closer, her voice low and venomous. You think you're so smart? Emma, you think because you have some old piece of paper from the 1930s, you can do whatever you want, but you're wrong. This community has rights, and I'm going to make sure we get what we're owed. I don't respond. I just stand there, phone in hand, documenting everything. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Tom Brennan's cruiser comes up the access road, followed by a second patrol car with a deputy inside. Tom gets out, looks at the backhoe, the trench, and Diane. Standing next to it, his expression hardens. Tom walks over slowly, his hand resting on his belt. Ma'am, this is private property. You're trespassing. Diane straightens. She cut off our water. I'm restoring access. By digging a trench on someone else's land without permission? This is an emergency. Our community is being deprived of water we have a right to. Tom looks at the trench, then at the backhoe operator, who's shut off the engine and is sitting nervously in the cab. Ma'am, you're destroying someone's property. Without authorization, it's criminal trespass, vandalism, and illegal water diversion. The backhoe operator climbs down from the cab, hands raised. Officer, I didn't know this was illegal. She hired me. She said it was HOA approved maintenance. Diane spins on him. Shut up, don't say anything. Tom ignores her and looks at the contractor. What's your name? Kyle Turner. I run a small excavation company out of Bozeman. Ms. Morrison called me 2 days ago, said the HOA needed a drainage trench dug to restore water flow to the subdivision. She said she had all the permits. Did you see any permits? No, sir, but she said it was all cleared with the county. Tom nods. Mr. Turner, you're not in trouble, but you need to shut down your equipment and give me a statement. Kyle nods quickly. Yes, sir. Tom turns back to Diane. Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for criminal trespass, destruction of property, and illegal water diversion. Diane's face goes white, then red. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. That doesn't give you the right to dig trenches on someone else's land. She started this. She cut off our water. She reduced it to contractual levels. That's legal. What you're doing is not. Tom pulls out handcuffs. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. This is insane.
Counts?
Arresting me for trying to help my community? Ma'am, turn around. Diane doesn't move. The deputy steps forward, positioning himself beside Tom. Finally, Diane turns around. Shaking with rage, Tom cuffs her, reciting her rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. ... double quotes. Diane is crying now. Not sad tears, angry, humiliated tears. Tom guides her toward the patrol car. She twists around, glaring at me. This isn't over, Emma. You think you've won? You haven't? Tom places her in the back seat and closes the I walk over to the trench and survey the damage, 30 feet long, 4 feet deep. The creek bank is torn up, soil and rocks spilling into the water. It's turning it muddy. And then I notice something that makes my stomach drop. The section of creek where the trench was dug isn't just any section. It's a spawning area. I see the gravel beds, smooth, rounded stones where fish lay their eggs. I see the shallow pools where fry hide from predators. And I know, the absolute certainty, that this is bull trout habitat. Bull trout are federally protected, endangered species. Can't touch their habitat without permits from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Diane just destroyed 30 feet of it. I pull out my phone and take photos, close-ups of the destroyed gravel beds, wide shots of the trench, the muddy water flowing downstream. Then I call Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. The biologist arrives within an hour. His name is Derek Chen. He's mid-40s, wearing waders and a Montana FWP jacket. He's carrying a clipboard and a waterproof camera. Tom is still on site, taking Kyle Turner's statement. Diane is in the patrol car, staring straight ahead, refusing to speak. Derek walks the trench with me, taking notes, photographing everything. "This is bad," he says quietly. "This is a confirmed bull trout spawning area. The gravel beds here are critical habitat. Destroying them is a violation of the Endangered Species Act." "How serious?" "Federal offense. Fines up to $50,000 per violation. Possible criminal prosecution." Diane didn't know there were fish here. Doesn't matter. Ignorance isn't a defense. She altered a waterway without permits. That's illegal regardless of the species involved. The fact that it's endangered makes it worse. Derek crouches by the trench, scooping up a handful of sediment-laden water. The sediment's going to travel downstream, contaminate the rest of the spawning area. We're looking at long-term habitat damage. Recovery could take years. What happens? Now, I'm reporting this to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They'll open an investigation. They'll find what I'm seeing. They'll file federal charges. He stands, looking at me. "Ms. Hartley, I'm sorry. I know this wasn't your doing, but your creek's been seriously damaged." "I know." Derek walks back to his truck, still taking photos. Tom finishes with Kyle, who climbs into his truck and drives. Off, shaking his head, Tom walks over to me. "Emma, I'm taking Diane to the county jail. She'll be booked on state charges. If Fish and Wildlife gets involved, she'll face federal charges too." "Could you okay?" I look at the trench. The destroyed creek bank. The muddy water. "No, but I will be." Tom nods. "Call me if you need anything." He drives off, Diane Morrison in the back seat, hands cuffed, staring out the window. I stand by the creek for a long time after everyone leaves. The backhoe sits abandoned, caked on its treads. The trench runs like a scar through my land. And somewhere downstream, in the subdivision Diane fought so hard to protect, the water is flowing again, unrestricted, uncontrolled. Exactly what she wanted, but it won't last because Diane Morrison didn't just trespass on my property. She didn't just dig an illegal trench. She destroyed federally protected habitat, and the federal government doesn't forgive that. Diane thought she was restoring water access. What she actually did was commit a crime she'd never come back from. Derek Chen drives back to Emma's ranch 2 days after the initial inspection, this time with a federal agent. In tow, the agent is a woman in her early 40s, compact and serious. Wearing a dark jacket with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service embroidered on the chest, her name is Maria Vasquez. She's been investigating environmental crimes in Montana for 12 years. Emma meets them at the trench site, now marked with yellow caution tape Derek placed during his first visit. Maria walks the length of the trench slowly, crouching periodically to examine the damage. She takes photographs with a high-resolution camera, measures the dimensions with a tape measure, and collects water samples in sealed vials. Derek points out the destroyed spawning gravel, the sediment plume still visible in the creek downstream, and the displaced bull trout he observed during his survey. Maria listens, takes notes, and asks precise questions. After 30 minutes, she stands and turns to Emma. Ms. Hartley, I've reviewed the initial report from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. What I'm seeing here confirms everything Derek documented. Ms. Morrison destroyed critical habitat for an endangered species. This is a federal offense under Title 16, U.S. Code, Section 1538, unlawful taking of an endangered species. The penalties include fines up to $50,000 per violation and potential criminal prosecution. Emma nods. What happens next? I'm opening a full investigation. I'll interview Ms. Morrison, the contractor who operated the backhoe, and anyone else involved. I'll compile a report and submit it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. If the evidence supports prosecution, and based on what I've seen, it will federal. Charges will be filed. How long does that take? 6 to 8 weeks. Maybe longer if Ms. Morrison's attorney tries to delay. But Ms. Hartley, I want you to understand this is serious. Federal environmental crimes carry significant consequences. Ms. Morrison is looking at prison time, substantial fines, and mandatory restitution for habitat restoration. Emma looks at the trench, the torn earth, the muddy water. Good, Maria's expression softened slightly. I know this is your land. I know she violated it. But I need to ask, do you have any personal animosity toward Ms. Morrison that might complicate this case? She's been harassing me for months. She sued me. She called 911 trying to have me arrested. Then she trespassed on my property and destroyed my creek. So yes, I have animosity. But I didn't create this situation. She did. Maria nods. Understood. I'll need a full statement from you, including timeline, documentation of water rights, any communications between you and Ms. Morrison. I have everything. Letters, emails, call logs, photos. My attorney has copies. Good. Send them to me. Within 48 hours, Maria hands Emma a business card and walks back to her vehicle with Derek. Emma stands by the trench. Watching them leave, the federal agent's words echoing in her mind. Prison time. Substantial fines. Mandatory restitution. Diane Morrison had crossed a line she couldn't come back from. 3 days later, Ria Vasquez sits across from Diane Morrison in a small interview room at the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office. Diane is out on bail-ton, $1,000 bond posted by her husband, but she's still facing state charges for criminal trespass, destruction of property, and illegal water diversion. Now, she's facing a federal investigation. Diane's attorney, Douglas Crane, sits. Beside her, Crane is in his 50s, expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of lawyer who charges $500 an hour and radiates confidence. Even when his client is guilty, Maria sets a digital recorder on the table and presses record. It's Morrison, I'm special. Agent Maria Vasquez with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm investigating the destruction of federally protected bull trout habitat on Emma Hartley's property on November 18th. You're not under arrest, but you are a subject of this investigation. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you. Do you understand? Diane glances at Crane, who nods. Yes. Why did you dig the trench on Miss Hartley's property? Diane straightens in her chair, trying to regain the authority she's used to projecting. I was fixing an illegal water shutoff. Miss Hartley installed a valve that cut off water to my community. 85 families depend on that water. I was restoring access. Did you have permission to enter Ms. Hartley's property? I didn't think I needed permission. The water flows through her land to ours. It's community water. It's Morrison. The water originates on Ms. Hartley's property. She holds senior water rights dating back to 1934. Did you know that? Diane hesitates. I knew there was some old agreement, but it was unreasonable. Did you know the creek section where you dug the trench contains bull trout habitat? No. Did you obtain any permits before altering the waterway? No. I didn't think I needed permits. It was an emergency. Maria leans forward. Ms. Morrison, ignorance isn't a defense. You altered a waterway without authorization. You destroyed protected habitat for an endangered species. That's a federal crime. Crane interjects. Agent Vasquez, my client acted in good faith. believing she had a legitimate right to restore water access to her community. Mr. Crane, your client trespassed on private property, hired a contractor to dig an illegal trench, and destroyed federally protected habitat. Good faith doesn't change the facts. Diane's voice rises. This is ridiculous. I was protecting my community. Emma Hartley was depriving us of water we need. Maria's tone stays calm, clinical. By trespassing and destroying endangered species habitat. Diane opens her mouth, then closes it. Crane puts a hand on her arm. Diane, don't say anything else. Maria stops the recorder. Ms. Morrison, the investigation is ongoing. You'll be notified if federal charges are filed. That's all for now. The federal investigation takes 6 weeks. Maria Vasquez conducts site assessments, interviews witnesses, and compiles a comprehensive report for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Montana. The findings are damning. Habitat destruction. 30 feet of bull. Trout spawning gravel destroyed. Gravel beds are critical for egg deposition and fry survival. Destruction occurred during pre-spawn preparation period, late fall, directly impacting reproductive success, sediment contamination, excavation released. Approximately 8 cubic yards of sediment into the creek. Sediment traveled 0.4 miles downstream, coating spawning areas, reducing dissolved oxygen levels, and degrading water quality. Effects will persist for 18 to 24 months. Population. 8 to 12 adult bull trout observed in the affected area prior to destruction. Post-destruction surveys detected only 3 individuals. Remaining trout displaced to suboptimal habitat. Reproductive output for this population segment reduced by an estimated 60 to 75% for the next 3 to 5 years. Legal violations. Unauthorized alteration of a waterway without U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permits Clean Water Act violation. Destruction of critical habitat for a federally listed Endangered Species Act violation. Criminal trespass and destruction of private property state charges. Prosecuted separately. Restoration requirements. Estimated cost to restore habitat. $35,000, $50,000. Includes removal of sediment, replacement of spawning gravel, recontouring of creek banks, and revegetation. Restoration timeline, 12 to 18 months. Full habitat recovery, 3 to 5 years. On January 14th, the U.S. Attorney's Office files federal charges against Diane Morrison. Charge: unlawful taking of an endangered species, 16 U.S.C. Section 1538A1B maximum. Penalty: $50,000 fine and/or 1 year imprisonment. Diane is also still facing state charges. Criminal trespass misdemeanor, up to 6 months in jail. $500 fine, destruction of property felony, up to 2 years in prison. $10,000 fine, illegal water diversion misdemeanor, up to 6 months in jail. $1,000 FEMA also files a civil lawsuit against Diane. Emma Hartley v. Diane Morrison, complaint for damages claims. Trespass and destruction of private property, costs of habitat restoration, legal fees, and associated expenses, emotional distress and loss of use damages sought. $120,000. Diane hires Douglas Crane to defend her on all charges. Crane is expensive, $500 an hour. $50,000 retainer, but Diane and her husband are desperate. They refinance their house to pay him. Crane's strategy is to argue that Diane acted in good faith, believing she had a legitimate right to restore water access to her community. He files motions to dismiss, arguing that the water use agreement was ambiguous and open to interpretation. Diane believes she was acting within her authority as HOA president. The destruction of bull trout habitat was unintentional and therefore not criminal. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Delgado, destroys each argument methodically. Ambiguous agreement. Rachel presents the 1996 water use agreement. The language is clear: irrigation and landscaping only. Maximum draw of 15 gallons per minute. No ambiguity. No wiggle room. Good faith Belefrachel presents Emma's certified letter from September, warning Diane that she was violating the agreement. She presents the sheriff's statement from November 3rd. Confirming Emma's legal authority to control the water, she presents Diane's own words at the emergency HOA meeting. If the lawsuit doesn't work, we'll take matters into our own hands. Premeditation. Intent. Knowledge that what she was doing was illegal. Unintentional habitat destruction. Rachel presents Maria Vasquez's report. Diane hired a contractor, directed him to dig a trench, and altered a waterway without permits. Ignorance of the law isn't a defense. Diane is responsible for the consequences of her actions, whether she intended them or not. Crane's motions are denied. By February, Diane's legal situation is collapsing. The federal case is airtight. The state case is airtight. The civil case is airtight. Crane advises Diane to take a plea deal. The U.S. Attorney's Office offers. Plead guilty to Endangered Species Act violation, 12 months in federal prison, reduced from maximum 1 year. $40,000 fine, reduced from maximum $50,000. $35,000 restitution for habitat restoration, 2 years supervised release on the state charges. The prosecutor offers. Pled guilty to felony destruction of property, 6 months in state prison, concurrent with federal sentence. $5,000 fine in the civil case. Emma agrees to settle for $85,000 in damages, reduced from $120,000. If Diane agrees not to appeal, total consequences, 12 months. In prison, $130,000 in fines. Restitution. And damages: permanent criminal record loss of HOA presidency, loss of reputation. Diane refuses the deal. She insists on going to trial. Crane warns her. Diane, if you go to trial and lose, you're looking at the maximum sentence. 18 months in prison, full fines, full restitution, no leniency. Diane doesn't care. I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do wrong. I was protecting my community. Crane sighs. Then we go to trial. The trial is scheduled for March 17th in U.S. District Court. Missoula. Diane is convinced she'll win. She tells her husband, her friends, her remaining HOA supporters. The jury will see I was trying to help. They'll understand. But Douglas Crane knows the truth. The evidence is overwhelming. Diane Morrison is going to lose. And when she does, she's going to lose everything. The federal courtroom in Missoula is smaller than most people expect. No, it's towering ceilings or marble columns, just wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, and rows of benches that seat maybe 50 people. On March 17th, those benches are full. Residents from Pine Ridge Estates occupy the left side, some supporting Diane, others just curious. Reporters sit in the back, notebooks ready. Emma Hartley sits in the second row on the right, alone, hands folded in her lap. At the defense table, Diane Morrison sits beside Douglas Crane. She's wearing a navy blue dress, pearls, and a carefully composed expression that doesn't quite hide the fear beneath. At the prosecution table, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Delgado arranges her files with calm precision. Judge Henry Caldwell enters, mid-60s, gray beard, stern but fair. He's been a federal judge for 22 years and has seen every kind of environmental case Montana has to offer. All rise. United States District Court for the District of Montana is now in session. The Honorable Henry Caldwell presiding. Stands. Judge Caldwell takes his seat. Please be seated. We are here for trial in the matter of United States v. Diane Morrison. Case number CR 261 for MDLC. Ms. Delgado, you may present your opening statement. Rachel Delgado stands, walks to the jury box, and addresses the 12 jurors: ranchers, teachers, retirees, small business owners, people who understand Montana land, water, and the rules that govern both. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about choices. On November 18th of last year, the defendant, Diane Morrison, made a choice. She hired a contractor, brought a backhoe, onto private property, without permission, and dug a 30-foot trench to divert a creek. She did this knowing it was illegal, knowing the property owner had warned her, knowing the sheriff had confirmed the owner's legal authority, and in the process, she destroyed critical habitat for an endangered species, the bull trout. Over the next few days, you will see photographs of the destruction. You will hear testimony from biologists, law enforcement, and the property owner. And you will see that the defendant's actions were not an accident. They were a deliberate violation of federal environmental law. Thank you. She sits down. Douglas Crane stands. Ladies and gentlemen, my client Diane Morrison is not a criminal. She is a community leader who made a difficult decision in an impossible situation. For months, her subdivision 8 of 5 families was deprived of water by a neighbor who controlled the source. Ms. Morrison tried to resolve the issue peacefully. She tried to negotiate. But when that failed, she acted to protect her community. Yes, she made mistakes. Yes, she should have sought permits. But her intent was never to harm the environment or break the law. Her intent was to help people who depended on her. It's not a crime. That's leadership. Thank you. He sits. Judge Caldwell nods. Ms. Delgado, call your first witness. The prosecution's case is methodical and devastating. Witness 1, Sheriff Tom. Brennan Tom testifies about the 911 call, the confrontation at Emma's gate, and his confirmation that Emma had legal authority to control the water. Did you inform Ms. Morrison that Ms. Hartley owned the water source? Yes. And did Ms. Morrison accept that? No. She said it was community water and threatened to sue. Did you warn her that trespassing on Ms. Hartley's property would be a crime? I didn't think I needed to. It's common knowledge. 2. Derek Chen, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks biologist. Derek presents his findings. Destroyed spawning gravel, sediment contamination. Displaced bull trout. Rachel projects photos on the courtroom screen, clear images of the trench, the muddy water, the torn creek banks. Mr. Chen, how long will it take for this habitat to recover? 3 to 5 years, assuming proper restoration. What is the impact on the bull trout population? We estimate reproductive output in this area will be reduced by 60 to 75%. For the next several spawning cycles. Witness 3. Maria Vasquez, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Maria walks the jury through the federal investigation, the legal violations, and the requirements under the Endangered Species Act. Agent Vasquez. Is there any situation where it's legal to alter a waterway containing endangered species habitat without permits? No. Federal law is clear. Any activity that harms, harasses, or destroys habitat for a listed species is illegal without prior authorization. Did Ms. Morrison have authorization? No. Witness 4. Emma Hartley. Emma takes the stand, calm and composed. Rachel asks her to explain the water rights history, the 1996 agreement, and her attempts to resolve the issue with Diane. Ms. Hartley. Did you ever threaten Ms. Morrison? No. Did you ever refuse to communicate with her? No. I sent her a certified letter in September. She didn't respond. I met with her in person in August. She dismissed my concerns. What did you do when she continued violating the agreement? I installed a flow control system to limit downstream water to the amount specified in the contract. 15 gallons per minute. Did you shut off the water entirely? No. I reduced it to legal levels. Rachel pauses. Hartley. When you discovered the trench on your property, what did you think? Emma's voice is steady but tight. I thought, she'd lost her mind. That creek has been in my family for 90 years. My grandfather built the ranch around it. My father protected it. I protect it. She destroyed it because she didn't like being told no. The defense calls one witness, Diane Morrison. Douglas Crane walks her through her version of events, trying to frame her as a concerned community leader forced into a difficult position. Ms. Morrison, why did you dig the trench? 'Cause Emma Hartley cut off our water. What 85 families depend on that creek for landscaping, irrigation, and water? Features. I had a responsibility to help them. Did you intend to harm the environment? Of course not. I didn't even know there were fish there. Did you believe you had a right to restore water access? Yes. We've been using that water for 2 years. It's community water. Crane sits down. Rachel Delgado stands for a cross-examination. Ms. Morrison, did you read the 1996 water use agreement? Diane hesitates. I skimmed it. Did it specify limits on water usage? I guess yes or no, Ms. Morrison? Yes. Did it specify that access was limited to 15 gallons per minute? For irrigation and landscaping only? Yes. Did Ms. Hartley send you a certified letter in September, warning you that your subdivision was exceeding those limits? Yes. Did you respond? No. Why not? I thought she was being unreasonable. Rachel's voice sharpens. So you ignored her warning, continued using 3 times the allowed amount, and when she enforced the agreement, you trespassed on her property and dug an illegal trench. I was trying to help my community by breaking federal environmental law. Diane's voice drops. I didn't know it was federal, but you knew it was Ms. Hartley's property. Silence. Ms. Morrison answered the question.
Yes.
And you knew you didn't. Have permission to be there? Yes. No further questions. The jury deliberates for 4 hours. When they return, the 4-persona woman in her 50s, a retired school teacher, stands and reads the verdict. In the matter of United States v. Diane Morrison, on the charge of unlawful taking of an endangered species under the Endangered Species Act, we find the defendant guilty. Diane's face crumbles. On the state charge of criminal trespass, we find the defendant guilty. She starts crying. On the state charge of destruction of property, we find the defendant guilty. Douglas Crane puts a hand on her shoulder, but she doesn't seem to notice. Judge Caldwell thanks the jury and schedules sentencing for 3 weeks later. The sentencing hearing is quieter, fewer spectators. No reporters, just Diane, her attorney, Emma, and the judge. Rachel Delgado presents the federal sentencing guidelines. Up to 1 year in prison and a $50,000 fine for the Endangered Species Act violation. The state charges add up to 6 months. Douglas Crane argues for probation. Your Honor, Ms. Morrison is a first-time offender. She has no criminal history. She's a grandmother, a community volunteer, a woman who made a terrible mistake but does not deserve to go to prison. I ask the court to consider probation, community service, and restitution. Judge Caldwell looks at Emma. Ms. Hartley, do you wish to make a victim impact statement? Emma stands. Your Honor. Diane Morrison trespassed on my ranch, destroyed habitat. My family is protected for 90 years and tried to have me arrested for managing my own water. She acted with entitlement and complete disregard for the law. She had multiple opportunities to stop warnings, letters, a sheriff's confirmation. She ignored all of it because she believed she was above the rules. I'm asking the court to hold her accountable. Emma sits. Judge Caldwell reviews the files in front of him, then looks at Diane. Ms. Morrison, stand. Diane stands, shaking. You committed a serious federal crime. You destroyed critical habitat for an endangered species. You trespassed on private property, caused significant environmental harm that will take years to repair. Your attorney argues you acted in good faith, but the evidence shows you acted in defiance of the law, knowing full well what you were doing. This court does not take environmental crimes lightly. He pauses. I sentence you to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You were fined $50,000 under the Endangered Species Act. You were ordered to pay $35,000 in restitution to Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks for habitat restoration. You were ordered to pay $120,000 in restitution to Emma Hartley for property damage and associated costs. You are permanently banned from Ms. Hartley's property. This sentence is effective immediately. Diane breaks down, sobbing. This is insane. I was trying to protect my neighborhood. Judge Caldwell's voice hardens. Ms. Morrison, you trespassed, destroyed protected habitat, and violated federal law. The sentence stands. 2 U.S. Marshals step forward and escort Diane out of the courtroom. In the months that follow, Pine Ridge Estates falls apart. Residents discover the truth about the water agreement, that they were only ever entitled to 15 gallons per minute, not enough for fountains, not enough for koi ponds, not enough for pools. The HOA sues Cascade Communities, the developer, for misrepresenting water access during sales. Cascade settles for $400,000, which the HOA distributes among residents. Most remove their water features. Some drill wells. Others connect to the expensive municipal water line. 20 miles away. 12 families sell their homes at a loss and leave. The subdivision never recovers its initial appeal. Emma uses the restitution money to restore the creek. Contractors remove the trench, replace the spawning gravel, recontour the banks, and plant native vegetation. By the following spring, bull trout returned to spawn. Emma rides Cisco along the creek one morning in early June. Watching the clear water flow over smooth stones, she sees movements, a flash of silver and red dot bull trout. 3 of them, holding position in the current, waiting for the right moment to spawn. Emma watches them for a long time. The morning sun warm on her shoulders. Diane Morrison had called 911 because Emma turned off her own water. She'd trespassed, destroyed a protected habitat, tried to steal what she had no right to. And now, she was in federal prison, serving 18 months. With a criminal record that would follow her for the rest of her life, Emma didn't feel satisfaction, she felt relief. The creek was healing, the ranch was safe, and some people like Diane Morrison had finally learned that community water doesn't mean you own it. It just means you were lucky enough to be invited, and invitations can be revoked.